The day I lost my kingdom, no one looked guilty enough. That was the part one remember most clearly, not the silver crown resting on the black velvet cushion, not the winter light cutting through the high windows of Northmere Palace, not even the council seal cracking beneath Vanessa Crow's calm white-gloved hand. It was their faces. Men and women who had eaten at my table, sworn oaths beneath my banners, and called me Alpha Queen when storms threatened the northern roads now stared at the marble floor as if betrayal were simply bad weather passing through. I stood at the center of the great hall in my dark velvet gown, ash-blonde hair pinned beneath the formal crown, blue-gray eyes fixed on the council bench, waiting for one of them to flinch. No one did. Vanessa looked almost kind when she read the declaration. That was her gift. She could make a knife sound like a lullaby. For the stability of Northmere, she said, voice smooth as cream poured over poison, Queen Catherine Whitlock has agreed to surrender temporary authority until the realm is restored to unity. Agreed. The word echoed beneath the painted ceiling and made something cold move through my chest. I had agreed to nothing. I had arrived that morning expecting a border report and a tax dispute over winter grain shipments. Instead, I found my advisor standing in formation, the royal notary holding a document I had never signed, and Vanessa wearing white as if innocence were a fabric she could purchase. I looked to General Harlan first. He had once called me the strongest ruler Northmere had seen in a century. Now his jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed down. I looked to Lady Mercer from the River District. She had written me letters of gratitude when I rebuilt her flooded town. She folded her hands and pretended to study the floor. Finally, I looked at Vanessa, my former advisor, my cousin by marriage, the woman I had allowed closer than any rival should ever be. She smiled with perfect sympathy. Your Majesty, she said softly, please do not make this harder than it already is. That was when I understood she wanted me to shout. She wanted the room to see rage, to hear desperation, to believe I was exactly as unstable as the paper claimed. So I gave her silence. I removed the crown myself. The metal was cold against my fingers, heavier than it had ever felt on my head. When I placed it on the cushion, a sound passed through the room. Not a gasp, not relief, but something worse. Acceptance. The doors opened behind me, letting in a draft that smelled of snow, pine, and horses waiting in the courtyard. I turned to leave without bowing. A queen could be stripped of a throne, but not of her spine. Halfway down the aisle, I noticed the young woman near the healing alcove. She was white-skinned, maybe 26, with soft brown hair, pale unfocused eyes, and a cream wool dress beneath a simple shawl. A white cane rested against her chair. She had been brought in for the palace infirmary, I assumed, one of the Omega healers who worked quietly at the edges of royal life, unnoticed until someone needed comfort. But she was not looking at Vanessa. She was not looking at the crown. Blind though she was, her face had turned directly toward me. Her lips parted. Her hand rose to her heart as if she had heard glass breaking under deep ice. Then in a voice barely louder than the snow tapping the windows she said, "She lost the crown, not the soul that wore it." I stopped walking. For the first time that morning, Vanessa's smile disappeared. The room noticed Vanessa's smile disappear before it noticed the Omega's words. That was how power worked in Northmere. Truth could whisper from the corner, but everyone waited for authority to decide whether it had been spoken. I stood halfway down the aisle with my hand still cold from removing the crown, listening as the silence gathered around that young woman in the cream wool dress. She did not shrink beneath it. Her pale blue eyes remained unfocused, aimed somewhere near my shoulder, while her fingers rested over her heart as if keeping time with music only she could hear. Vanessa recovered quickly. She always did. Nora Bennett has been assisting the infirmary since dawn, she said, her voice smooth again, though I heard the thin crack beneath it. She is tired. Emotional sensitivity is common among Omega healers. Nora. The name settled inside me with a strange, quiet weight. I had never met her, not knowingly, yet the sound of it felt less like an introduction than a door opening in a house I had forgotten I owned. Nora turned her head slightly toward Vanessa. I am not tired. A few council members shifted in their seats. General Harlan stared harder at the floor. Vanessa took one slow step down from the dais. Then perhaps you misunderstood what you felt. Nora's mouth tightened, not with anger, but with the exhaustion of someone who had been told that all her life. No, she said. I felt the crown leave her head. I felt the room become colder when no one reached for her. My chest tightened so sharply I nearly forgot to breathe. I had spent years perfecting the art of being unreadable. Queens are trained to turn grief into posture, fear into silence, loneliness into law. But this blind Omega spoke of my hidden places as if she had walked through them barefoot. Vanessa's gaze flicked to me, quick as a blade of winter light. She knew it too. Nora was not guessing. She was hearing something Vanessa had not accounted for. Miss Bennet, Vanessa said, still gentle enough to sound harmless to anyone who did not know her. You will return to the infirmary at once. Someone escort her. 2 attendants moved from the side wall. Not guards, not yet. Vanessa was careful to dress control as concern. I should have kept walking. I had no crown, no command the room would obey. No proof in my hands except the ache in my ribs and the false document on the council table. But when Nora reached for her white cane and one attendant touched her elbow without permission, my body moved before politics could stop it. Do not handle her. My voice was quiet, but it cut cleanly through the hall. Every head turned toward me. For one dangerous heartbeat, I saw the old reflex wake in them. Not loyalty. Not enough for that. But memory of obedience, muscle deep and confused. Nora's face turned toward me again. There, she whispered. That sound. Ice over running water. I almost laughed, though there was nothing funny in me. You make me sound unpleasant. No, she said. You sound like someone trying not to break where people can see. Vanessa descended another step. Catherine, leave while dignity is still available to you. Hearing my name from her mouth felt like watching a stranger wear my family ring. I looked at the council, at the crown on its cushion, at the woman who had taken my kingdom without raising her voice. Then I looked at Nora, who had no reason to defend me and every reason to stay invisible. Nora Bennet, I said, do you know who I am? Her hand tightened around the cane. I know what you are not. And what is that? Empty. The word moved through me like warmth entering a frostbitten hand, painful because it was alive. Vanessa's expression hardened. Enough. Remove her from the hall. This time the attendants moved faster. Nora stood, but not because they guided her. She rose on her own, chin lifted, cane in one hand, the other pressed to her heart. I saw then that the side door near the map room stood open behind the healing alcove. Beyond it was the old passage to the North Service tunnels, a route I had used as a girl when palace ceremonies became too heavy. Vanessa saw me notice it. Her eyes narrowed. I stepped toward Nora. When I reach you, take my hand. I already know where you are, she said. I heard you before you spoke. I crossed the aisle, not as a queen returning to power, but as a woman choosing the only person in the room who had chosen truth. Nora's fingers found mine with impossible certainty. Behind us, Vanessa called my name sharply, and for the first time all morning she sounded afraid. The side door closed behind us with a softness that felt more dangerous than a slam. For one breath, the great hall, the council, the crown, and Vanessa's sharpened voice became muffled behind carved oak, and all that remained was the narrow map room with its tall shelves, rolled charts, cold fireplace, and the blind Omega's hand folded tightly around mine. I knew every inch of that room. I had studied Northmere's borders at the center table when I was 12, too young to understand war but old enough to memorize rivers, roads, and the names of towns that would one day depend on me. Now the maps watched silently while I crossed to the north wall, and pressed my palm against a carved mountain near the coastline. A hidden latch clicked. Nora turned her face toward the sound. Stone moving, she whispered. A passage. An old service tunnel. Built for servants, messengers, and frightened princesses who wanted to avoid state dinners. Were you one of those? Often. The panel opened inward, releasing a breath of air that smelled of dust, iron, and winter trapped underground. Nora stepped closer to me, not shrinking, only listening. From the hall behind us came footsteps and Vanessa's voice, low now, controlled enough to frighten me more than shouting would have. Catherine, this will only make you look unstable. I almost turned back. Not because I believed her, but because old training is a cage with velvet bars. A queen does not run. A queen stands, argues, commands, endures. Then Nora's thumb moved once against my knuckles, small and steady. She wants you to answer her, Nora said. Yes. Then do not give her what she wants. I looked at the blind woman beside me and wondered how someone who had never seen a court could understand power so clearly. We entered the tunnel together. The passage was barely 4 feet wide, lined with stone damp enough to darken my sleeve when I brushed against it. I took the lantern from a hook near the entrance, struck a match, and watched weak gold light tremble over Nora's face. Her pale eyes remained unfocused, but her expression was alert, almost calm. 6 steps down, I warned. 7, she said. I paused. How do you know that? Your breath changed before the last one. She was right. The 7th step dipped sharply, a defect I had forgotten until my body remembered it. We moved lower, away from the palace heart. Above us, muffled voices crossed the map room. Someone tried the panel. Vanessa had found it locked from within. A thin smile touched my mouth despite everything. You enjoy that, Nora said. A little. Good. You sounded almost alive. The words landed too close to the truth. I guided her through the tunnel, describing what she needed and nothing more. Low beam, narrow turn, uneven stone, 3 steps to the right. She never complained, not when the air grew colder, not when dust made her cough softly into her sleeve, not when the passage sloped downward and the hem of her cream dress gathered gray at the edges. At one point she stumbled on a loose stone, and I caught her by the waist and elbow before she fell. The contact lasted only a second, practical and careful, but she went still as if she had heard something inside me open. You are afraid for me, she said. You are useful to me. That is not what I felt. I released her gently. Then your gift is mistaken. No, she said, and there was no challenge in it, only certainty. You are. We reached the outer grate beneath the north terrace as the first palace bell rang behind us. Vanessa was sealing the grounds. Beyond the grate, snow fell over the old hunter's road, a pale ribbon leading into the black pines. It was 6 miles to the abandoned lodge, rough but passable, packed hard beneath the storm from years of winter travel. I pushed the grate open and cold air rushed around us, clean and sharp with pine resin. Nora lifted her face to it. The world feels larger out here. It is also less forgiving. So are palaces. I wrapped my silver cloak around her shoulders before she could refuse. She touched the fabric, then turned toward me. You are colder than I am. I have endured colder. That is not comfort. That is history. I had no answer for that, so I took her hand and led her onto the road. Behind us, Northmere Palace rose white and perfect against the morning, its windows bright with the lie Vanessa was trying to make permanent. Ahead, the forest waited. I had left my kingdom without guards, without a crown, without a single oath still certain beneath my feet. Yet Nora walked beside me as if following my soul were easier than following a road. After a while she said quietly, Catherine. My name sounded different in her voice. Not royal. Not useful. Human. Yes. If they take the kingdom from you, what remains? Snow moved between us, silent and silver. I should have said duty. Bloodline. Law. Instead, with her hand warm in mine, I told the truth. I am afraid to find out. The hunter's road tested every honest answer I had ever avoided. Snow came in soft sheets at first, then in thicker waves that blurred the pines and turned the world into white breath and black branches. I kept Nora close to the packed center of the path, describing the ground before her cane found it. Shallow dip, root under the snow, fallen branch to the left, 3 careful steps over a frozen rut. She listened with such complete trust that it made my chest ache. Trust had always come to me wrapped in ceremony. People trusted the crown, the seal, the armies, the law. Nora trusted the sound of my voice while walking into a forest she could not see. That felt less like loyalty and more like a mirror held to the parts of me I had hidden too long. After nearly 2 hours, the abandoned hunting lodge appeared through the storm, crouched beside a frozen creek with its stone chimney leaning slightly toward the pines. It had belonged to my grandfather, then my father, then the royal inventory, where forgotten things went to gather dust under official names. I forced the warped door open with my shoulder and guided Nora inside. The lodge smelled of cold ash, cedar, and old wool. There were 2 chairs, a rough table, a fireplace blackened from winters past, and enough stacked wood to make the room livable. Not comfortable. Livable. At that moment it felt like grace. I helped Nora sit near the hearth, placed her cane against the chair, and knelt to build a fire. My fingers were stiff from the cold, and a scrape across my palm reopened when I struck the match. I ignored it. The flame caught on the third try, then climbed, orange and stubborn, spreading warmth over the stone floor. Nora turned toward me immediately. "You are hurt." "It is only my hand." People who say only usually mean more than they admit. I looked at her over the small fire. "Do you correct every fallen monarch you meet?" "Only the ones who think pain becomes noble if they refuse to name it." Against my will, a laugh escaped me, quiet and rough from the cold. It startled us both. Nora smiled toward the sound. "There you are." The words should have meant nothing. Instead, they reached behind the armor I had been fastening since childhood. I found a kettle, melted snow for warm water, and tried to wrap my palm myself. Nora held out her hand. "Let me." "You cannot see the wound." "No. But I can feel when someone is pretending not to need help." I gave her my hand before pride could invent another excuse. Her touch was careful, practical, and steady. She cleaned the scrape with warm water, then wrapped it in linen from her pouch that smelled faintly of lavender and winterroot. There was nothing improper in the closeness, nothing fragile except the silence between us. Yet I felt more exposed than I had standing crownless before the council. "You are quiet again," she said. "I am thinking." "No. You are standing in front of a locked door inside yourself and calling it thought." I looked away toward the small window where snow pressed against the glass. "You speak boldly for someone who knows very little about me." Nora tied the bandage with a gentle final pull. "I know you lost a kingdom today, and that is not the thing hurting you most." The fire cracked softly. Outside, wind moved through the pines like distant surf. "Then what is?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. Nora kept my bandaged hand between both of hers, warm and certain. "You are afraid that without the crown, no one has a reason to stay." The lodge went still around me. I had survived council wars, border winters, years of being praised for composure while loneliness hollowed out the rooms beneath my ribs. No one had ever said it so plainly. My throat tightened, and when I finally spoke, my voice belonged less to a queen than to the girl who once learned that love in palaces was often another word for usefulness. "What if I am right?" Nora lifted my hand and placed it lightly over her own heart. Beneath wool and breath, her heartbeat answered with quiet strength. "Then start here," she whispered. "This stayed before you had anything left to offer." For a long moment, I felt only Nora's heartbeat beneath my hand, steady and quiet in the ruined lodge while the storm worried at the shutters. It should have been a simple human rhythm, nothing more mysterious than life insisting on itself. Instead, beneath it I heard an echo. Not with my ears. Somewhere deeper. A faint silver pulse answering mine, like a second bell ringing under the floor of a frozen lake. I pulled my hand back too quickly. Nora inhaled as if something had been taken from her. "What was that?" she whispered. I stood, because standing had always helped me remember who I was, but the room tilted before I could gather myself. The fire stretched into a blur of orange and gold. My bandaged hand pressed against the table. A memory opened without warning. I was 17, standing alone in the North Chapel after my mother's funeral, still wearing black gloves because no one had told me when mourning was allowed to end. I remembered the candles. I remembered the snow tapping the stained glass. Then the memory thinned, its edges dissolving like ink in water. I reached for my mother's voice and found only silence. "Catherine," Nora said, rising from the chair. "Something is pulling away from you. Stay where you are." No, her answer was soft but absolute. She crossed the room without her cane, guided by whatever thread had just trembled between us. Her hand found my sleeve, then my wrist, then the center of my chest, where my heart was beating too hard beneath velvet and cold pride. The moment her palm touched me, the fire changed color. Orange became white, then silver blue, bright enough to paint the cedar walls with winter light. The lodge vanished from my senses. I smelled bread cooling on a wooden table, lavender drying from kitchen rafters, and rain on a farmhouse roof far from any palace. I heard a child breathing in the dark. Then I saw nothing because the memory was not mine to see. It belonged to Nora. She was small, maybe 10 years old, sitting beside a window with a blanket around her shoulders and both hands pressed over her ears. Not because the world was loud, but because one voice inside the silence was crying so hard she thought it might break her. My voice. Older than hers, colder than hers, lonely enough to cross years before we ever stood in the same room. The vision shifted. Nora at 14, touching the wall of a school hallway while other girls whispered that she was strange. Nora at 18, waking from a dream with my name almost on her tongue, though she did not know it yet. Nora last night in the palace infirmary, pausing over a tray of clean bandages because something in the building had suddenly gone quiet, as if a crown had stopped breathing. I came back to myself with a gasp. Nora's hand was still over my heart, and tears had gathered on her cheeks. "I thought I imagined you," she said. "All my life, I thought loneliness had learned to speak in a woman's voice." I could not move. I had lost council, crown, soldiers, and every public certainty by noon, but this was the first loss that frightened me beyond language. The knowledge that some hidden piece of me had been living in Nora before I had earned the right to know her. Between our hands a thread of pale silver light appeared, thin as silk stretching from my chest to hers. It did not burn. It did not bind. It simply existed, honest and impossible. "Nora," I said carefully, "how long have you heard me?" She lowered her face toward the light she could not see but clearly felt. "Since I was a child." The storm struck the windows again, and the silver thread pulsed in answer. I understood then that Vanessa had not merely taken my kingdom. She had severed me from everything that recognized me. Everything except the one soul that had somehow been carrying my echo for years. Nora touched the thread with trembling fingers, and her expression changed from fear to wonder. "This is why your pain sounded familiar," she whispered. "You were never a stranger." I looked at the blind Omega who had followed me through snow, read my grief through silence, and kept my soul safe without knowing its name. For the first time since the crown left my head, I did not ask what remained of me. I was staring at the answer. The silver thread faded slowly, not gone, only hidden again beneath breath and heartbeat, and the lodge felt different afterward, as if every wall had overheard a secret and agreed to keep it. Nora lowered her hand from my chest, but the warmth remained there, unsettling in its gentleness. I had spent 42 years believing my soul was a private country, guarded by rank, discipline, and the kind of silence people mistook for strength. Now I knew a part of it had crossed miles, years, and darkness to survive in a woman I had met only hours ago. Nora sat back in the chair, her fingers still trembling in her lap. "When I was little," she said, "I used to wake up before dawn because I heard someone walking through snow in my dreams. I could never see her, of course, but I knew she was proud. I knew she was tired. I knew she never asked anyone to stay. I looked at the fire because her face was too honest. That sounds like a lonely child inventing company. That is what everyone told me." Her voice did not break, but it thinned in a way that made my chest tighten. So I stopped telling them. Before I could answer, 3 knocks sounded at the lodge door. Not rushed. Not loud. 3 steady knocks, followed by the scrape of a cane on the porch boards. My body went still. Nora turned her head toward the sound. "An older woman," she whispered. "Paper, cedar, and old grief." I moved to the door and opened it only a few inches. Margaret Ellison stood in the snow with a dark wool coat buttoned to her throat, and a leather satchel clutched under one arm. She had once been Northmere's highest royal judge, the only woman in the council who could make ministers fear grammar, precedent, and moral consequence in equal measure. I had not seen her since she retired to the western villages 3 years earlier. Her white hair had loosened in the wind, and her face was pale from the cold, but when she looked at me, she did not look at a fallen queen. She looked at Catherine Whitlock. "Your Majesty," she said. The title nearly undid me. I stepped aside and let her in. Margaret's gaze moved to Nora, then to the fire, then to the faint silver glow still pulsing once in a while between us. "So it is true," she murmured. "Vanessa found the crown severance oath." Nora's fingers tightened on the arms of the chair. "What is that?" Margaret set her satchel on the table and removed a narrow book bound in cracked blue leather. An old law from before Northmere had a throne. It was created to remove rulers who became dangerous, but it required proof, witnesses, public judgment, and mercy. Vanessa used only the severing part. She cut the queen away from the recognition of her people. "That is why they accepted it," I said. "Not because they believed her. Because the oath taught their hearts to stop reaching for you." Margaret opened the book to a page marked with a faded ribbon. But the oath has a flaw. It cannot sever what has already been carried willingly by another soul. The room turned very quiet. Nora's face lifted toward me. I did not need sight to feel her fear. The echo, she whispered. Margaret nodded. A soul echo. Rare. Usually formed years before a crisis, when one person's hidden grief is heard by another with unusual sensitivity. I wanted to reject the softness of that explanation, but the silver thread had already proved what pride could not erase. How do we undo the oath? I asked. Margaret looked older then. At Vanessa's public oath ceremony, the one who carries the echo must name the true queen before the court. Not the title, the soul. If Northmere hears that truth through her, recognition may return. Relief came first, sharp and dangerous. Then Nora asked the question my fear had already formed. And what happens to the echo inside me? Margaret closed the book carefully. It may return to Catherine. Nora's lips parted. May. If the oath is satisfied by restoration alone, it could take with it every emotional memory tied to the echo. The dreams. The bond. Perhaps even your memory of what you felt today. The lodge seemed to lose all warmth. I had wanted my kingdom back with a hunger that shamed me. Yet suddenly I saw the crown as Vanessa had made it. A thing that could demand payment from someone who had already given too much. No, I said. Margaret looked at me. There is another path, but it is harder. The queen must choose the witness before the crown, and the witness must choose the queen freely, without being used as a tool of restoration. If both choices are true, the echo may become a bridge instead of a debt. Nora stood slowly and reached for my hand. She found it on the first try. Then we go back. You could forget me. I could. Her thumb brushed the edge of my bandage. But I have spent my whole life hearing you survive. Do not ask me to become safe by turning away now. Outside, far beyond the forest, a palace bell rang through the snow. Margaret closed her satchel. Vanessa's ceremony begins at sunrise. Nora held my hand tighter, and the hidden thread between us answered. Then we have one night to teach a kingdom how to remember. We left the hunting lodge while the sky was still dark enough to hide fear and pale enough to promise consequence. Margaret led us through the old survey road with a lantern covered in blue cloth, its light dimmed to a ghost so it would not betray us from the palace ridge. Snow had stopped falling, but the forest held its breath beneath the weight of it. Every pine branch bent low, every step softened by white. Nora walked at my side, one hand around her cane, the other in mine. I had offered my arm, then my cloak, then the chance to stay behind with Margaret's protection. She refused each kindness with the same quiet answer. I am not leaving the part of me that knows you. Those words followed me for 3 miles, warmer than the wool at my shoulders and more dangerous than the cold ahead. By the time Northmere Palace rose through the trees, sunrise had begun to silver the eastern sky. The towers looked exactly as they had the day before, beautiful, severe, and loyal to whoever stood inside them with enough confidence. I hated that stone could be so indifferent. Margaret stopped at a narrow postern gate half buried behind frozen ivy. This entrance leads beneath the West Archive, she whispered. Vanessa will expect Catherine to enter through the front hall if pride brings her back. Pride did not bring me back, I said. Nora's fingers tightened once around mine. No, Margaret said, looking between us. That is why we may have a chance. The passage inside smelled of old paper, lamp oil and damp stone. We moved through the archive tunnels while bells began ringing above us, calling nobles, ministers, guards, and servants to Vanessa's oath ceremony. Each bell felt like a question struck in bronze. Are you still queen? Are you still brave? Are you willing to lose what found you? I kept speaking because Nora had asked me to. I told her where the ceiling lowered, where the floor tilted, where my mother once hid banned poetry behind tax records. She smiled at that. Your mother sounds more interesting than the portraits suggest. She was. The memory stayed. That small victory nearly broke my composure. We emerged behind a carved screen near the great hall. Through its latticework I saw the chamber filled wall to wall. Counselors in winter formal wear. Guards with ceremonial sashes. Families from the high districts. Vanessa stood before the dais in a white gown embroidered with silver branches, one hand resting near the crown I had set down yesterday. She looked serene, triumphant. Almost holy if holiness could be tailored. People of Northmere, she said, voice carrying through the hall. Today we complete a difficult mercy. We release the realm from uncertainty. Nora leaned close. Her voice has no sorrow in it. No. Then she has no right to speak of mercy. Margaret touched my shoulder once, then moved toward the judge's bench with the blue book hidden under her coat. Nora and I stepped from behind the screen into the side aisle. No one turned. Not because they could not see me, but because the oath had trained their hearts to pass over me as someone already removed. General Harlan stood 10 feet away. His eyes crossed my face and slid away empty. That hurt more than I allowed myself to show. Nora felt it anyway. Say something true, she whispered. I am angry. More true. My throat tightened. I am afraid he will never remember why he once believed in me. She nodded. Good. Hold that. It is yours. Vanessa lifted the crown, and the air chilled so quickly that frost appeared along the edge of the dais. Margaret opened the blue book. Nora stepped into the center aisle, her cane touching stone once, twice, each tap impossibly clear. Vanessa saw her and smiled. Miss Bennet, she called. Still chasing echoes? Nora faced the dais, calm and pale in the morning light. No, she said. I followed one home. The hall reacted to Nora's answer before Vanessa did. A ripple of unease passed through the council benches, small enough to deny but large enough to disturb the perfect shape of the ceremony. Vanessa held the crown at chest height, silver light sliding over her white gloves, and for the first time since she took my throne, she looked directly at the Omega instead of through her. How brave, Vanessa said. And how unfortunate. A blind girl mistakes an echo for truth, and now wishes the entire kingdom to kneel with her. Nora stood alone in the center aisle, cream dress touched by dawn, white cane resting lightly against the stone. I do not need sight to know when a room is lying. A few people drew sharp breaths. General Harlan's head turned toward her, his brow tightening as if an old command had stirred under sleep. Vanessa's smile thinned. Then tell us, Miss Bennet. What does a queen sound like? Nora turned then slowly away from the dais, away from the crown in Vanessa's hands, away from every visible symbol of power. She turned toward me. The oath still made most eyes slide past my face, but Nora found me with the certainty of a hand finding its own heartbeat. The silver thread hidden between us answered, brightening beneath my ribs. A queen sounds like someone who is tired of being useful and still chooses duty, Nora said. She sounds like winter over running water. Like a locked door that kept a light burning behind it. Like a woman who lost a crown and still stopped to protect the person everyone else tried to dismiss. The hall had gone still. Margaret's voice rose from the judge's bench, reading from the blue book. Recognition freely given may interrupt severance falsely claimed. Vanessa snapped her gaze toward Margaret. That text has no standing. Margaret did not look up. It has more standing than forgery dressed as mercy. The word forgery moved through the hall like a match dropped into dry straw. Vanessa lifted the crown higher, and frost burst along the dais in a ring of white. No one was hurt, but everyone felt the cold. Enough, she said. This realm needs certainty, not fairy tales from an old judge and an overworked Omega. Nora lowered herself to one knee. Not toward Vanessa. Not toward the dais. Toward me. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. Catherine Whitlock, she said, clear and steady. Alpha Queen of Northmere, the soul I heard before I knew her name, the woman whose grief crossed years and still chose to shelter mine. My queen is not the woman holding the crown. She is the woman whose soul never stopped protecting mine. For one heartbeat the world refused to move. Then General Harlan made a sound like a man waking from deep water. His hand went to his chest and he dropped to one knee. Your Majesty, he whispered, and the title cracked open the room. Lady Mercer followed, sobbing once into her gloved hand. The notary stared at the false declaration as the ink began to fade from the page. One by one the council remembered. The guards remembered. Servants at the walls remembered. The painted ceiling above us shimmered, and the blank place where my coronation scene had dulled returned in blue, gold, and snow-white color. Vanessa stepped back from the crown as if it had grown too heavy to hold. The silver light left her gloves and moved across the hall toward me, but I did not reach for it. Nora was still kneeling, one hand pressed hard to her heart. Her face had gone pale. The bond between us flared, then pulled. The soul echo was answering the kingdom, trying to return as payment. The hall filled with my name, but all I heard was Nora's uneven breath. I crossed the aisle and knelt before her while hundreds watched. "Nora," I said. Her lips trembled. "I know that voice." "Yes." I took her hands, careful and desperate. "Stay with it. It feels far away now." Behind me, the crown hovered in the air, waiting for a queen who had stopped looking at it. I looked into Nora's unseeing eyes and understood the final shape of the choice. I could reclaim Northmere in one breath and lose the only soul that had found me without a throne. So I let the crown wait. I let the crown wait because Nora was slipping away in front of me, and no throne in Northmere was worth the sound of her forgetting my name. The great hall had become a sea of kneeling bodies, whispered apologies and returning memories, but all of it blurred at the edges while I held her hands between mine. The silver light behind me pulsed once, impatient as an old law expecting obedience. I had obeyed old laws my entire life. I had been dutiful before I was loved, composed before I was comforted, useful before I was known. Nora had felt all of that without ever asking me to prove my strength. Now the oath wanted to take from her the very echo that had led her to me. "No," I said, and the word rang through the hall with more power than any command I had given as queen. The crown lowered slightly, hovering above the aisle. Margaret's voice trembled from the judge's bench. "Catherine, speak the free choice. Before it decides for you." I understood then why Vanessa had failed, even with the oath in her hands. She had wanted recognition without truth, restoration without love, power without witness. I turned back to Nora, whose face was pale but brave, her unfocused eyes searching the sound of my breathing. "Nora Bennett," I said, slowly enough for every soul in the hall to hear. "I choose you before the crown. I choose the woman who heard me when I had nothing left to offer. I choose the soul that sheltered mine without asking for a kingdom in return." Her fingers tightened. "Catherine, I am here. I am trying to remember the lodge. Then let me remember it with you." I brought her hand to my heart, and this time I did not hold back from the bond. I gave it the truth I had hidden from everyone. The child in the chapel after my mother's funeral, the queen who sat awake over winter grain reports, the woman who feared she was only wanted when she was useful, the moment in the snow when Nora asked what remained of me and I was too afraid to answer. The silver light swept around us, not cold like Vanessa's severance, but warm as dawn striking ice. Nora gasped, and I felt the echo inside her shift. It did not tear free. It opened. The part of my soul that had lived in her returned to me as a bridge, carrying her courage with it, leaving my truth in her by choice instead of debt. Her breathing steadied. Her thumb moved over my bandage, the same small gesture from the lodge. "You were afraid to find out what remained," she whispered. Relief broke through me so fiercely I nearly bowed my head to her hands. "Yes, I remember." Behind us, the ancient crown settled gently onto the stone floor, waiting not as a master, but as an answer. Only then did I rise, bringing Nora with me. The hall remained silent. Vanessa stood near the dais, white gown dimmed by ordinary morning light, her borrowed certainty gone. No one shouted. No one needed to. The false declaration on the council table had turned blank, and the people who had followed it now saw the emptiness for themselves. General Harlan stepped forward, tears in his eyes, and bowed to Nora before he bowed to me. "Northmere owes you its memory," he said. Nora shook her head softly. "No. It only needed to listen." When I finally lifted the crown, it was lighter than it had been the day before, not because the kingdom had become easier to carry, but because I no longer believed I had to carry it unseen. I took the oath again beneath the restored ceiling, with Margaret reading the true law and Nora standing beside me, not behind me, one hand resting lightly on my sleeve. By sunset, Vanessa had been sent under guard to the southern estate to await judgment by a restored council, and Northmere's bells rang across 20 miles of snowy valley. Yet the victory I kept closest came later, in the winter garden, where the roses slept beneath frost and the palace windows glowed gold behind us. Nora stood beside me while snow settled in her brown hair. "I still cannot see your crown," she said. I looked down at the silver circlet in my hands, then at her gentle, knowing face. "Good." She smiled. "Good. If I ever forget what matters, remind me that you found me without it. Nora reached for my wrist and found my pulse at once. I know exactly where your soul is. I covered her hand with mine, and for the first time since losing everything, I understood what I had won.